Good afternoon, everybody. This is John Pielli here with another edition of the Pass Ball Show. On Sunday, a Colorado Rockies fan was trying to get the attention of the team's mascot, and there was a misunderstanding that he was actually dropping an N-bomb or saying something racially insensitive when it was proven that he absolutely wasn't. And one of the things that we really have to go through when we're dealing with situations like this is the jumping to conclusion to assume that this person was guilty before anybody even tried to figure out what it was that he said. It was obvious that the context of what was going on certainly made it and proved the fact that this person did nothing wrong. Yet, there are going to be some people that are going to bash the racial card as much as they absolutely can. And I could be as sensitive as I possibly can for somebody that has been wronged, for something that could be switched or viewed in a way where somebody's feelings could be hurt. This was a situation that you're taking a random person at a random sporting event and potentially ruining their life, their reputation, and their future. And to me, there was absolutely, positively no reason for this. Now, listen, could you see from some people's perspective how they could have seen it as it was? Or it could have sounded like he could have said it? Yes, that part I will stand by. But what I will not agree with is after that, if you took the time that you needed as a responsible adult, it's very obvious that this person didn't do anything wrong. And there has to be some sort of accountability for those that went out on a limb and made this guy out to be something that he wasn't. Because there was no reason for that. You know, I give Adam Jones credit. I give Bob Nightingale, amongst other people, credit. Those that jumped out to an early conclusion and realized that they were wrong. He said, hey, I went to go assume that something was happening, and then after I got the right amount of data and the right amount of information, I realized that I made a mistake. You know what? We all make mistakes. So I can't fault anybody for jumping to a conclusion once this thing kind of came out and went viral. But the problem with this is that it hung in the air too long for something that never had any levity to it. And this is the part that bothers me, because there is video evidence that existed right away over whether this person said what you might have thought he said and then said what he actually said. There's video evidence, proof. The guy standing behind home plate, he is pointing to the mascot of the Colorado Rockies and is calling out the Rockies mascot's name. The mascot's name is Dinger. And he says it over and over again, but he's holding his arm out towards him. He's not saying anything to anybody on the field. He's not saying anything to the Marlins batter, which at the time was Lewis Brinson. There's a problem with that. And I like that they got it right. I like that the Colorado Rockies issued a statement. I like that just about anybody that overreacted, that had a name to them, apologized for jumping to conclusions. The problem was that this should have been squashed right away. In fact, it should have been figured out on the Rockies broadcast exactly what that fan was referring to, because the evidence was there to back this person. Instead, he has to be portrayed, and I don't know the man. I've never met him before, but he very much well is being treated in a way that he shouldn't be treated. And for those that advocate for racial and social equality, I'm one of them. Isn't that what you want? Don't you want somebody treated fairly for what it is that they said? Like I said, this wasn't 1947 Crosley Field, Jackie Robinson's first time to Cincinnati. And let me add to it that there's very few people that would have the balls to do what that man was perceived to do. I mean, how do you go to a game, sit a couple rows behind home plate, and think you're going to get away with saying something like that, and then still have to deal with public, still have to deal with the other fans as you're coming out of the game? Obviously, somebody's going to take a video of it. So nobody in their right mind would willingly plan to do something like that in the year of 2021. And the problem is we don't give society enough credit for how far we've come with this. In fact, you're finding probably 90% or more of people that are making racially insensitive comments are doing it under false handles. In other words, they're not even putting their name behind it. How do you take that person as being a real person? Yes, those opinions exist. And I'm never going to back away from the fact that, yes, there are people that feel negatively towards others that aren't them. Racism is never going to 100% go away. But we've progressed to the year of 2021 where those that do make racially insensitive comments do it in a backhanded way, like Bob Brenly. Bob Brenly didn't intend to put down Marcus Stroman. He didn't intend to make a racist comment. He feels bad for it. He's getting sensitivity training. And then others hide behind fake handles. In other words, you change your name. You're no longer John Pielli when you say it. You're somebody else. And because of that, they get the point of what you want to say, but you don't have the accountability that goes behind it. And like I said, this should work both ways. And this man should be given free tickets if he's not a season ticket holder. He should be given something from the Colorado Rockies, and it's not like the Rockies did anything wrong. Like I said, you have enough people in that stadium that can get a gravity and sense of what's happening. There could have been a quicker response. There could have been a response put on that broadcast before that game was ended. All of whom would have made this fan probably feel a little better. Because odds are that guy left that stadium feeling awful. And for God's sakes, he's there with his grandkids. I mean, the bottom line is the general public, and obviously the year that we live in right now, used to be able to commit a crime and you were innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And now when it comes to the court of public opinion, you are 100% guilty until proven innocent. And the only way, I'm going to put this screen down, the only way that this man gets away with it, or he doesn't have to live with a lifelong sentence for what was perceived that he said, is the fact that there was video evidence to back up what actually happened. And when it comes to the court of public opinion, how many times does this happen? Does somebody just say something? Oh my God, you said this. I said, what? Yes, you said this. I did not say that. I heard you say that. So that one person that misunderstood you has a chance to totally tarnish and destroy your reputation. And I'm glad that there was enough video evidence available to exonerate this guy. And like I said, I don't know him for a hole in the wall. Ironically, he could be racist. But there was nothing that happened at that game. There was nothing in that man's actions, in what he said he did, that had anything close to the racial slur that he was accused of saying. And like I said, in a court of public opinion, in order for this man to not have to face the consequences of his action or his perceived action, there has to be video evidence to prove that he didn't do it. And I'm glad that happened. And like I said, this isn't the Rockies' fault, but I would hope that the Rockies would do something nice for this man. Next thing. Was thinking about the New York Football Giants the other day. They had a heated practice. Their coach, Joe Judge, got a little animated. Was cursing at the players. Made them run sprints. The atmosphere made you think of, I don't know, football in the 70s or 80s where the coach actually was able to lace in the players, give them a hard time. And then you hear over the next couple days, a couple New York Football Giants players announcing their retirement. Now, I've read into it. I haven't seen it said directly that the tough practices had anything to do with each one of these players retiring. Now, there was at least 3 players within a couple days all announced their retirement. And this is coming off of that intense practice where the Giants players are fighting with each other and the coach goes ballistic and all of a sudden everybody's got to run sprints. And you understand, certainly in the post-coronavirus era, you wouldn't want practices to be as physical. Obviously, you've had players that have lost their lives for dehydration. So the days of double workouts and, really, really tough practices are probably by the wayside. That being said, the average pro football player, and I'll say this probably about baseball players, basketball players, hockey players, cannot handle a practice that takes any sort of exertion out of them. You've gotten to a point where players want these practices to be a walkthrough. Now there's demands on the players to perform. There's demands on the coaches to get the most out of their players. There's demands out of the organizations that they represent to get the results that they need to get year after year. And if we've gotten to a point where a coach can't push a player, a coach can't push a team, I have a little bit of a problem with that. I have a big problem with that. And you're looking at sports which have basically been turned into players-only kind of things. Coaching, as it's emphasized in sports, is kind of going by the wayside. You've heard me talk about the Major League Baseball manager. I've emphasized how the baseball manager is just a puppet. He has his strings pulled by the front office. He's told what to do by the front office. In many instances, the players are told what to do exactly from the front office. What role does a Major League Baseball manager have? A lot of fans will never understand that, but it's the truth. Have we followed the NBA? LeBron James, in addition to being the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, is now the general manager. You look at the moves that were made last week, which we talked about on the PBS. Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard. That's all LeBron James. He's making those moves. And obviously we understand coaches being the biggest scapegoat. If things don't go well, your team loses a couple games, all of a sudden the expectations that were very high are kind of, you're wondering where those expectations came from because the team's playing so poorly. We don't blame the players. We don't blame the front offices. We blame the coach. The coach is there as a scapegoat. And I wonder if we're seeing before our own eyes that transformation happening in the National Football League. Because if that does, we really got to look at ourselves in the mirror and question why a coach is in the position that they are in the first place. You tell me and sub anybody's name for Joe Judge as you want. I'm calling out the Giants and I'm mentioning Joe Judge because this is what happened. Has Joe Judge lost the ability to go after his own players, to discipline his own players, to be hard on his own players? Because if he has, I have a problem with that. The NFL is the most physical game in all of sports. Certainly the most physical team sport. A coach comes in and gets a job differently in the NFL like they do in Major League Baseball or they do in the NBA. In the NBA, you could be a good assistant and you can kind of have a lot of the understanding of how you're going to run your playbook when you become a head coach. You know who your key players are. You know who you're going to center your offense and defense around. Baseball manager, you're given a set of instructions. Hey, so-and-so was hired the other day. They're going to be the manager of this Major League Baseball team. They already have a list of exactly what they're going to do. Their lineups are handed to them. Their defensive alignment is set for them. The NFL head coach is different. The NFL head coach comes in and implements his own philosophy, both on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, for special teams, brings in his own coach. In fact, the NFL head coach is the closest thing to a general manager than any head coaching position in any other sport. That coach is responsible for that team succeeding. That coach is going to be held responsible if that team fails. So, as you look at what could be a minor situation involving one football team, if this becomes a major problem global throughout the sport of professional football, then you're going to really watch a sport potentially crumble right before our own eyes. You've seen the situation with Aaron Rodgers. You've seen for years the situation with the diva receivers as they're out there in the National Football League. And you know what? There's no discipline. There's no plan. There's no setup. There's nothing that's going to completely change players for maybe thinking they're bigger than they are, or players thinking they're bigger than a team or bigger than the sport. The NFL is a great show-me sport. Yeah, you could go out there and score a touchdown. You could go out there and win a game, and you could pump your fist out and say, F you. There are very few sports that you could exert the amount of energy that you do in the National Football League. And the players get rewarded for it. The players get rewarded with the attention for succeeding in the National Football League. So I'm by no stretch or no imagination advocating to get rid of players that think that they're better than a team or better than a sport. Problem is the coach has to be able to maintain discipline. And I'm not saying the coach should hit the players. The coach should not strike the players. If a player is not doing what they're supposed to, they should be held accountable for it. If a player is not performing well, they should have to hear it from the head coach. And if players are out there running sprints as a punishment on the field, nobody, starting with the players, but certainly the fans, the media, anybody else, has the right to criticize that. That coach is, yes, they're in most cases being paid handsomely. They are solely responsible for the success or failure of that team. And when you're dealing with 50 in training camp, 70, 80, 90 players, and 20 plus coaches, it should very well be expected that order is retained. And the responsibility from that order is coming from the head coach himself. So you hear about the possible tampering that exists or could exist between a couple teams, mainly the Chicago Bulls. Made the trade for Lonzo Ball right after the free agency and the offseason started officially in the NBA. And the question is, this should be more cut and dry than I think the general public has made it out to be. And I kind of find it funny because, there's no way that the Chicago Bulls couldn't have been in contact with number one, the player, number one, Lonzo Ball, number two, the Pelicans, to agree to a sign and trade and then announce that it's done and completed 2 seconds after they're allowed to start. This obviously was a foul. I don't know what the NBA plans to do about it, but I was thinking about what my angle should be on this. And it started out being, all right, well, hold the team accountable. You think of the Chris Paul trade years ago that Commissioner David Stern decided that was against the sanctity of the league and voided it. I don't think anybody expects the Lonzo Ball sign and trade to be voided. But the question is, who is the one that's calling foul here? Yes, the NBA said they're going to have an investigation. Well, they had their investigation, and how could they not find that something had to be up with a sign and trade that's agreed to between two teams, and one team that's going to sign a major contract with another team 2 seconds after free agency starts? My issue isn't whether a foul was created or committed. It was. My issue is, does the NBA care? Does the NBA give a shit? They probably don't. So do they feel for, backlash at a court of public opinion, like somebody's going to be upset that they have to go out there and address it? Because they addressed it in a half-ass way. Nothing's going to come of it. The NBA is not going to avoid this sign and trade deal. The NBA has done nothing to keep other teams from saying that this is not the way to go down the road. If I'm a team when it comes to the start of free agency next year, I'm going to set up my sign and trade. I'm going to talk to all the players that I want to talk to and have signed, and I'm going to have agreements with them before free agency starts, which is essentially what happened with the Bulls, Lonzo Ball, and the Pelicans. And like I said, my issue isn't with what happened. It's the fact that there is no consequence to it. They launched an investigation for what? That would be my question. My question to the National Basketball Association is, why did you waste your time launching this investigation? It accomplished nothing. It got you nowhere. In the end, you're not going to hold the Bulls, the Pelicans, and or Lonzo Ball accountable for anything. This is basically a message to the rest of the NBA. When free agency starts, yes, it officially starts at a certain time, but you can have agreements set. You can tamper with players. You can agree to trades with other organizations, as long as you don't make it official until free agency starts. That's the message I got out of it. A little bit of a recap of the show today, and as always, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. The Pass Ball Show is brought to you by JohnPielli.com, by St. Aloysius Church in Jackson, New Jersey, by two ways. One Passion Food Truck located in Scranton, Pennsylvania. You can also check the Pass Ball Show podcast out on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music. And we just tried Reason. So there's another way. Obviously, YouTube, the videos. Contending Baseball is on the Contender. I host a show Sunday afternoons at 2 p.m. talking strictly baseball. But as far as recapping the show today, like I said, a couple little pet peeves, couple little things kind of bothered me that I really felt the need to get out. Number one, the mistake that was made by many people in their judgment of that Colorado Rockies fan that was calling for the mascot of the Rockies. He didn't say the N-word. And had there not been video evidence, this man would have been ridiculed. This man would be branded a racist. And you'd have so many different spokespeople trying to remind the general public why racism is not okay. Which, by the way, the majority of us know that. The majority of us know that racism is unacceptable. In fact, the majority of the people that are making racist comments, the ones that are racist, are hiding behind fake names. They're doing it on social media platforms where they don't have to identify themselves. In fact, if I wanted to make social media more socially acceptable for everybody and fair, I'd force every person that gets a Twitter account, every person that gets an Instagram account, to have a spot where their actual name, their name, first and last name, is on their account. And maybe you have an exception if you're a minor, but this is assuming adults 18 years of age or older can make their social media accounts say whatever they want it to say, but somewhere on there is going to be their first and last name. And that's going to make them accountable for everything that they say. And you want to decrease racist comments, homophobic comments, sexually harassing comments by 75, 80%? Put a name to them. That person is going to be less inclined to harass somebody when they know their friends are going to know about it and their family are going to know about it. And everybody that knows their name is going to put their name right next to what they just said. And this man who was just trying to get the attention of the mascot of the Colorado Rockies was going to be branded a racist for the rest of his life unless there was video evidence to prove that he didn't say what you think he said. Number 2 was NFL practices. Have they become too tough? Have players become too soft? What's the issue when it comes to practices in the National Football League? Have coaches lost their ability to be disciplinarians, to hold players accountable, to get mad and shout at their players, to make them run laps and sprints? Are these all things that are going to go by the wayside? And I've said all along, the head coach in the National Football League, and the same thing with college, they have more responsibility than a baseball manager, an NBA or NHL head coach. You're going to take away their ability to discipline. And like I said, I'm not talking about, a paddle. I'm not talking about being able to slap and hit the players. I'm talking about accountability for their actions. If a player is not executing a play right, they should have to run. They should have to do push-ups. The coach should be able to get in their face. And you saw a situation last week with the Giants. Their practice kind of got out of control. And I think it's a fine kind of segue into what I really want to say here. That practice may have been getting out of control because there was a lack of discipline. And if players get the sense that they could go in there with big contracts and essentially do whatever the hell they want, you're going to have all-out brawls happening amongst teams during their practices. You're going to have players that are going to do whatever they want because there's no discipline. The discipline has to come from the head coach. And then finally, talking about specifically the Lonzo Ball sign and trade, which, by the way, I love the move. You had him and Kyle Lowry, Vujacic, who they got from the Orlando Magic, and obviously their star player, Levine. This is a team that should be pretty good next year. I like the Bulls going into next year. They're going to be a threat in the Eastern Conference. That being said, they violated the rules that were set in the NBA because they had to have talked to Lonzo Ball and agreed to a contract before free agency started. They had to have talked to the New Orleans Pelicans about a sign and trade because they had it agreed to 2 seconds after free agency started. And I don't even necessarily have a problem with that. I have a problem with the NBA conducting an investigation about something that they could have cared less about in the first place. Why do you have an investigation if there's going to be no repercussions? Your message to the other teams was, this is what you should do. Who cares about the start of free agency? Announce everything that you did after free agency. Once again, this is the Pass Ball Show brought to you by JohnPielli.com, by St. Aloysius Church in Jackson, New Jersey, by 2A's One Passion Food Truck located in Scranton, Pennsylvania. We'll be back with you next week. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.